Hey there, it's the Slayer here. How's it going? Good to see you here today. Now, in addition to my primarily gaming content, I have decided to do a limited number of movie reviews for franchises that I am really fond of. These will be in a short podcast format segregated into a few chapters for your ease of reference. I am not going to include any clips to avoid any fair use debate, but I am going to give you the gist of it and distill key aspects of select old and new films that will interest both casual fans as well as people familiar with the franchise. Now, the first one is one of my all-time favorites. The Bad Boys series that I grew up watching in the 90s and early 2000s. Today, I am going to do a quick review of Bad Boys Ride or Die that just hit cinemas yesterday. Yo, what's up with this Bad Boys Ride or Die film, man? They better not mess up one of my favorite franchises. The summary of the review is that this film is still a great community experience. I mean, it was fun to watch it in the theater with people. Surprisingly, the younger generation, possibly not familiar with the franchise, still in splits at the jokes throughout the movie. But on the whole, for both casual viewers and fans of the franchise, this is strictly a one-time watch in a cinema or over drinks in a big gathering with friends. I give this movie 7 out of 10. Now let's get into it. Part 1, the cast. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence are still impressive on screen, and at no point did you feel that they were too old for the franchise. So no Murtaugh style I am too old for this moments really. The rest of the supporting cast filled their roles pretty well and were able to portray their characters as intended. Shout out to Rhea Seehorn, Paola Nunez, Jacob Scipio, Joe Pantoliano, limited to retrospectively positioned video recordings, and the others. It was pretty good to see Dennis Green reprise his role as Reggie from Bad Boys 2, and he is arguably the best scene in the movie. Alexander Ludwig also has an interesting role in Mike and Marcus's police team. It is also good to see some strong female characters in the movie. They aren't damsels in distress, or exotic dancers, or helpless passive family members, or overly glamorous models, but at the same time they are not toxic feminists or deceptive and political. Paola Nunez's police captain and Rhea Seehorn's marshal's character were strong as they could be and relatively realistic. Part 2, the setup, spoiler-free. I wasn't impressed with the first half of the film as I felt that it was trying too hard to force the pace, and in the first part everything seemed clustered and jammed up together, and they were also trying to throw in a couple of callbacks to iconic moments of the series. But on the whole, the plot, although generic, is relatively coherent and the movie becomes better from the second half, though a few minor plot points unnecessarily thrown in slightly dilute the overall quality. But I appreciate that this movie has a hectic pace and keeps you entertained whether or not you like the film, and this is the first film I haven't walked out of for a long time. Part 3 of Bad Boys for Life was a good film, but it felt like a more serious movie trying too hard to show these guys have grown up. Now, I also appreciate that Ride or Die continues with some characters and plot points from Part 3, but in essence it is the film we wanted before Part 3. Someone down the line after watching Part 3, I always felt that it rushed to conclusion too early, and given the big gap after Bad Boys 2, somewhere down the line we had missed out on another mindless fun movie with these guys, and Rise or Die is it. Part 3's the action. The action is not bad at all, not the best choreography and in no way a John Wick movie, but good enough for this franchise. The first 40% of the movie looked a bit odd on the big screen, but in the second half it is pretty decent and you get a mix-up of normal cinematic views and some first-person gamer-like body shots. But the best scene by far is not an exciting one in a falling helicopter that the media is talking about, but one with Reggie. Its entire setup in the scene and how other characters react in it is by far one of the best scenes in the franchise and one of the few that is of the quality to fit into the first 2 Bad Boys movies. Part 4's the jokes. Honestly, I thought some of the jokes in this movie were nothing great, albeit some jokes at the beginning and the comedic timing in actors' responses to some of the action scenes were all right. Personally, I didn't think the jokes were as good as Bad Boys 1 and 2 barring 30% of them, but the entire cinema was in splits throughout the movie, so good enough I guess. There was one joke in a pub scene involving a potential act joked about with a lady who betrays the teen to thugs. I wasn't offended by this joke or the sequence, but thought it didn't have the class to fit into this movie. But I don't think anyone in the audience thought much about it, and it didn't detract from their experience. Part 5. Once again. Once again, that Reggie scene, and the reference to it in the ending. It is the highlight of the movie, to such an extent that, forget spoiling, I am not even going to give any of the context to you, and you gotta watch it. Part 6. The slap. Yes, there is a funny scene where a slap is thrown in, and it is hilarious in context of the movie. Some feel it is a reference to the Will Smith slapping Chris Rock thing. I am not too sure about that, but the context had the theater in splits. Part 7's soundtrack. I didn't like the soundtrack of this movie at all. Maybe it was also because the movie in general didn't sound good in the first 30% of the movie, possibly due to an issue in the cinema I saw it. But in no way was the same level of investment made in the soundtrack of this movie like it was in Bad Boys 2. I mean, back in 2003 we bought the Bad Boys 2 album on Discman. Part 8. Conclusion. On the whole, a satisfactory movie experience. A very good attempt to revive the franchise, and they tried hard to make sure it doesn't come off as culturally dated. Despite some hilarious plot points, some plot points were good for this kind of movie too. Although the film felt a bit rushed, they did try to do some justice to it. But as a fan of a franchise, in my mind, there is no way that this film matches Bad Boys 2 or even 1 perhaps, and despite a very good attempt to make it something new, it does leverage the brand of the franchise a bit. I mean, Bad Boys 1 was iconic for its fun. Bad Boys 2 was a beautiful action movie at the time in 2003, and its filming, visuals, and fight choreography were impressive at the time, and its jokes fit the context of its time. With fast-paced scenes and wonderful soundtrack, it was a great move up for the franchise. But Bad Boys Ride or Die, whilst it still passes off as a good communal/party one-off experience and did well to continue the franchise, is probably safer to rate a couple of steps behind the originals. So thank you for your time tonight. I hope you enjoyed this short podcast movie review. Please let me know your comments and views on this movie and its overall franchise, and let me know which film you want me to review next. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.